Is it autistic person or person with autism? Is one more correct than the other? What term does someone on the autism spectrum prefer? In this video, I'll be answering all of those questions and more, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and keep on watching. Okay, so before I do dive into the two different labels and which one is actually preferred in the autism community, I just want to give a quick backstory to why I am filming this video today, or if you're listening to the podcast, recording this episode. Back in 2020, I posted a video titled How I Found Out I Have Autism, and I like to refer to it as my autism coming out video. I filmed it shortly after I discovered I am autistic earlier that year, and I talk about how I believe my eating disorder masked my autistic symptoms for so many years. I remember feeling so scattered while recording that video, and that's honestly because I was. A whole new world had completely opened up for me, a world I didn't even know existed. It was as if I had been living as a single speck of color in a black and white universe, and suddenly I could see the entire color spectrum. Now, don't mind the pun, but if you're already familiar with me and my work, you know I love metaphors, and I feel like the color spectrum is such a beautiful way to symbolize the autism spectrum. Just like every color on the color spectrum is unique with its own hue, value, and chroma, every individual on the autism spectrum is unique with their own traits, interests, and personality. Anyways, that video was really my best attempt at making sense of everything that simply hadn't made sense for the past 20 years of my life. I was a complete newbie to the whole neurodivergent community and immersed myself into learning as much as I could about neurodiversity and everything that has to do with it. Obviously, I have learned a lot in the past 2 years and continue to learn each and every day. I mean, that's the beauty of life. We are constantly learning and growing and becoming wiser and stronger because of it. So in this video, I want to share one of the most prominent lessons I have learned since starting my autism journey, and that is regarding the role of semantics. When I posted my first autism video back in 2020, I always thought person with autism was the exact same thing as autistic person. Just like one says potato, potato, or tomato, tomato, I assumed they were simply different accents of the same idea. Well, boy, I could not have been more wrong. Even though I believed them to mean the same thing at their core, the reason I initially referred to myself as someone with autism as opposed to autistic person has to do with my history of an eating disorder. Let me explain. When I was struggling with anorexia, never did I identify with the disease. I hated it when people referred to me as an anorexic or disordered eater because I was not anorexia. I was not my eating disorder. You can have anorexia or you can have any other eating disorder or disease or illness for that matter, but the disease itself is not you. Now, this distinction is really important to make when it comes to disorders or diseases or illnesses because it gives you the opportunity and the power to recover from and one day be free from the illness. When it comes to autism and neurodiversity, however, it's a whole different story. Although the official diagnostic name for autism, as stated in the DSM-5, which means the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, is autism spectrum disorder, this definition is completely mislabeled because autism is not a disorder. It's not something that you suffer from and should strive to recover from. Being autistic simply means your brain is wired differently, which is part of what makes you so dang unique. Now, I didn't know any of this when I first started my autism journey. I was just glad my weirdness finally had a name, and I didn't really consider the identity aspect of it. This quickly changed after I started sharing more about having autism on my Instagram, and an autistic individual kindly pointed out to me that people on the autism spectrum prefer to use identity-first language over person-first language. Speaking of constantly learning, these were yet again two completely new terms for me. So, I did what any other autistic person would do, and I did more research. I am now going to explain the difference between identity-first language and person-first language, and which one you should use when communicating with people on the spectrum. Does the idea of cooking healthy meals overwhelm you? Because it totally overwhelms me. And that's why I am so excited to tell you about Daily Harvest, a plant-based meal delivery service that creates meals, snacks, and desserts based on fruits and vegetables. Not only can cooking itself feel overwhelming for neurodivergent people, but meal planning, grocery shopping, cleanup, and everything else involved in the process can just feel like too dang much. We then may turn to quick and easy solutions that probably are not the best for our body, or even worse, we may just feel too overwhelmed to eat at all. But I can say from first-hand experience that nourishing your body is one of the most important aspects of living a fulfilled life, especially as an autistic person. Thanks to Daily Harvest, you can have all of your favorite meals and snacks delivered straight to your doorstep, so you can nourish that body and mind without any of the stress. Daily Harvest accommodates a wide variety of diets, lifestyles, and preferences, such as vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, and paleo, which is just so ideal for all of my fellow autistics with a sensitive stomach. It's always so hard for me to pick favorites, but a few Daily Harvest items I absolutely love are the chocolate and blueberry smoothie, the broccoli and cheese with a Z harvest bowl, the cacao nib and vanilla bites, which basically taste like cookie dough, and all of their flatbreads, which basically taste like pizza. And it gets better because you can now get up to $40 off your Daily Harvest order by using my code LIVELabelFree at checkout. So just head over to daily-harvest.com and use the code LIVLABELFREE at checkout for up to $40 off of your order. I will also put the link in the description so you can get to not cooking ASAP. Now, let's get back to the episode. Identity-first language puts a person's condition or state before the person. In the autism community, most people prefer using terms such as autistic, autistic person, or autistic individual. This is because we understand autism as an inherent part of our identity. Similar to how most individuals in the LGBTQ plus community prefer to be called gay or queer instead of person with gayness or person with queerness. Or think about people with a specific racial or cultural background or religion. Most individuals will say, I am African American or I am Jewish, as opposed to a person with African Americanness or a person with Jewishness. Person-first language, on the other hand, puts a person before their condition or state. In the case of autism, person with autism or individual with autism would be used. Many ableist organizations advocate for using person-first language, arguing that person-first language is to remember that the individual is a person first. But honestly, you should not need to remember that an autistic individual is a person first. The problem with person-first language and why most autistic advocates prefer to use identity-first language is because person-first language implies that autism is something we carry and is not part of our innate being. In my opinion, one of the most appalling ways person-first language is used is person who suffers from autism. The argument for this phrase is to prompt the possibility of treatment for the disorder, but as I mentioned earlier, autism is not a disease or an illness. It's simply a different way of being and cannot and should not be sought to be cured or treated. So, should you use autistic person or person with autism? Well, if you've made it this far into the video or episode, if you're listening to the podcast, first of all, you are awesome and loyal, and I love and appreciate you. And second of all, I'm sure it's pretty clear which terminology you should use when it comes to communicating with individuals on the autism spectrum. As someone who is super detail-oriented, believes strongly in righteousness, and is hyper-attentive to semantics and nuance, I prefer to use identity-first language. Autism is part of who I am. It's not something I can lift off my shoulders and put aside for a moment, and it's not an illness like an eating disorder that I have to fight to get rid of or to recover from. Everything about me is autistic. Every move I make, every choice I face, every social interaction I have, it's all me being autistic. However, I am aware that every individual is unique and different neurodivergent individuals will prefer different terminology. I myself will often use the terms interchangeably just to provide some variety in my language. But I now know the important distinction and will be very intentional with my words depending on the specific situation. Hopefully, watching this video has inspired you to be more intentional in your communication with individuals on the spectrum. And remember, if you're ever unsure about which language to use, simply ask the person you are communicating with. As a relatively new member of the autistic and neurodivergent community, I understand that certain terminology can be so confusing, and like I said at the beginning of this video or episode, if you are listening to the podcast, I am constantly learning and allowing myself to be educated by others. There is absolutely no shame in not knowing all the answers because no one has all of the answers. That's what life is for, and that's what people are for. That's what communities are for. We are all here to educate and learn from each other. So, with that said, let me know in the comments one thing you learned from today's video if you are watching on YouTube, or send me a DM on Instagram with any insights or further questions if you are listening to the podcast. As always, be sure to subscribe wherever you are watching or listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.